In this module, we'll be discussing the basic supplies that we'll need in order to script Arabic calligraphy. To be more specific, we'll be discussing the writing tools, ink, and the paper we'll be using for calligraphy scripting. The number one requirement for an Arabic calligraphy writing tool is that it must be a chisel tip and that the chisel tip must be at an angle. Now, there are a lot of flat-edged chisel tip instruments out there that you can purchase. However, for the purpose of Arabic calligraphy, these will not suffice. And the reason is the angle and the manner at which we hold the pen for Arabic calligraphy is very different from the dynamics of English calligraphy. And so it would become very difficult for you to script with something that is a flat edge from the top. So make sure that you obtain a writing tool that is both chisel tip and that the chisel tip is at an angle. Essentially, if you have an angle chisel tip instrument, you're ready to write Arabic calligraphy. However, there are some options that are better than others, and that's what I would like to discuss with you here. The most common tool, and also one of the oldest tools to write Arabic calligraphy, is the bamboo qalam. This is something that has survived the test of time, and calligraphers even till this day prefer the bamboo qalam over a lot of other instruments to write calligraphy. This is also my number one recommendation to you, and later in this module I'll be teaching you how to create a bamboo qalam from scratch. Another tool that I use on a very regular basis, and you'll see me use it from time to time as part of this course, is the Java qalam. Now, the use of the Java qalam is slightly a bit more complex than the bamboo qalam. However, the advantage to this tool is that it is extremely sturdy. In fact, a calligrapher many years ago was able to write the entire Quran from cover to cover with the Java qalam without even sharpening the edge once. So you can imagine how sturdy this pen would be. I typically use this pen to script tashkil and ornamentations. If you're creating an artwork that requires a larger text or larger script, then I can recommend something like the Sali or the Jali qalam to you. The Jali qalam basically has a wider chisel tip and has a higher number of grooves. So because of this wide edge chisel tip, you're able to write scripts that are bigger and broader, essentially. A relatively new addition to the repertoire of traditional tools is the Dashti qalam. Essentially, the tip of the Dashti qalam is made from a type of wood that is very absorbent. And so when you dip this pen in ink for a few seconds, the tip of the pen is able to absorb enough ink that you can write perhaps a whole word or a couple of words without having to recharge or reload the ink again. Let's now discuss how to create a bamboo qalam from absolute scratch. The first step is to slice off the top of the stem in a diagonal fashion, starting about 1 inch from the tip, and the depth should be all the way till the end of the hollow part. And you'll know exactly what I mean once we get to that stage. So there's absolutely no reason for you to rush through this, even though the video is being fast forwarded, but take off one slice at a time, and right there you can see that we've reached the hollow part, and you're going to keep on slicing till we reach the end of the hollow part. And here we are. So this is what the qalam looks like at this point in time. The next step is to shave off the sides of the qalam, and the reason for this is twofold. The first is to remove any chipped edges, and the second reason is to adjust the width of the qalam according to your personal preference. Now, as we do this, you'll realize that the top of the qalam is becoming more and more rounded, which is the opposite of having a chisel tip. So that's no good. So the next step is to give this pen a nice and straight chisel tip by shaving off the top of the qalam. And here we are. Well, almost. There. Once we've done that to the front, we'll do the exact same thing to the back of the tip because the qalam flows in both directions, and so it's important for both sides of the qalam to be straight and chisel tipped. Okay, and here we are. So this is what the qalam looks like at this point in time. The next step is to take a knife or a pair of scissors and chop off the top of the qalam at about a 30-degree angle. Now notice that this is not a 45-degree angle. It's a lot shallower than that. And this is what the qalam looks like at this point in time. The last step is to take the bamboo qalam, put it on a hard surface, and using a knife, put a slit down the middle of the pen. And the purpose of this is so that the pen can absorb ink and your strokes can last longer. And make sure it's nice and wide so it can absorb the maximum amount of ink possible. And here we are. This is what the final qalam looks like. So now that you know how to create a bamboo qalam, the question is, where do you get bamboo from? So it's actually not very difficult to get bamboo if you're looking in the right areas. You can get bamboo from any local gardening store or even hardware stores. I personally get my bamboo, believe it or not, from Home Depot. In the gardening department, they have entire stems of these bamboos, and they're inexpensive, and they last me a very long time. Traditionally, the ink that has been used for calligraphy scripting has been in the color black. Ink was traditionally created by combining soot with acacia gum. Soot is essentially flaked carbon, while acacia gum is the sap that is retracted from the acacia tree. One thing I'd like to mention is that everyday fountain pen ink will not work for calligraphy scripting. This ink is very light and fluid and does not have enough opacity that we are looking for in our calligraphic work. My recommendation to you is that you use India ink or any other dark sketching ink. The brand that you see here, Cali, is the brand that I typically get for my calligraphy scripting. Not only is this brand available on Amazon and eBay, you can actually get these at any local art store. A couple of my students have actually been able to grab a bottle at their local Walmarts, so they are definitely very widely available. Traditionally, paper was first dyed, starch-coated, and then eventually burnished. This is so that the paper can have a slightly glossy finish. Now, notice that I mentioned slightly glossy. What you want to avoid is something that is extremely glossy, because then you'll have a challenge while scripting with the qalam and moving around the ink on the surface of the paper. What you also want to do is avoid the other extreme, which is the extremely grainy or the watercolor kind of paper. The grainier the paper, the more ink it'll absorb. The more ink it'll absorb, the more ink will spread within the body of the paper, and that will eventually give you a very untidy piece of work. My recommendation to you, and the brand that I personally use for my calligraphy scripting, is a Dotmar First Choice color print paper. This comes at 32 lb, which is slightly thicker than your average 20 lb printing paper. I get these from my local Staples, and I'm sure you'd be able to grab yours from any local stationery store.